Okay, welcome everybody and 3D friends. I'm assuming here I don't need to share my screen yet. My guess is that most people understand what the stereo window is, and this is going to be a very basic presentation. The reason I'm doing this, and I got convinced to join the Instagram age about 7 or 8 months ago, and I started posting some of my photos on Instagram. It's an interesting format. It's designed for being on your phone, so everything's tiny, and you can probably have a little bit more parallax in your photos because they're so small. But one of the things that is a benefit is I discovered this whole new world of 3D photographers out there, and there's a lot, surprisingly a lot. And I was enjoying just sort of absorbing all of this new 3D content from around the world. But one of the things that I noticed was that a vast majority of photographers on Instagram have no concept of the stereo window. And I shot in 3D for about 3 years before I joined a 3D forum, and I posted one of my favorite photos, and it turned out that somebody immediately jumped on me and my lack of knowledge of the stereo window. Well, for whatever reason, that person sort of explained to me in 2 or 3 sentences what was going on, and it was just something that clicked with me, and I understood it. Of course, once I understood it, I looked back at 3 years of photos that I'd taken, and I'm like, I had to go back and like readjust all these photos. But this person pointed me to Stereo Photo Maker, and interestingly enough, I had been editing all of my photos in Photoshop, and I had Stereo Photo Maker on my computer. I had found it at some point and downloaded it, and I had just never used it. Didn't understand what it was, and I just had it. But anyway, there's get in there, do this, do that, and you can line everything up. So that's what I'm doing today. Is I'm just going to describe what the stereo window is, for anybody who doesn't understand what it is, and maybe try to make some sense out of it for you. It's kind of like riding a bike. It's once you understand it, once you see it, once it makes sense to you, you'll always see it. You'll always be aware of it. And I think the goal more than anything is to present a comfortable viewing experience for the people you're sharing your 3D photos with. That's the big one. I would hear people for years, walking out of the theater with all the 3D movies several years ago, and I would sit in some of them, and the window violations would just be horrible. And people would be walking out of the theater, 3D gives me a headache, and I'm sitting there and I go, I know exactly why they've got a headache. And it's because of a complete and total lack of control of the 3D window, and just assuming that the audience wants everything sitting in their lap. And that's just not the case. So I'm going to start out with a simple visual aid here. Am I in speaker view where everybody can see me on their screen? I'm not just like a little chip, right? Okay. Because all I'm seeing is you right now, Steve. So
you're spotlighted, I'm pretty sure.
So I went out and I bought this cheap picture frame. And I want you to imagine this is your stereo window. Your stereo window is the edges of your photos. Let me share a picture with you here real quick. So if you imagine that the edges of your photo are solid, that they're unbreakable, and you don't even have to have a border. It's just the extreme edges of all of your photos. That's your zero parallax. That's sort of if you lived in a 2-dimensional space, and there was glass in this frame, and you're looking into a window, this right here, this flat area is zero parallax. And you can have things that are behind the window, like I am right now, or everything that's behind your window, it's what's known as positive parallax. And everything that's in front of your window, sticking through your window, is negative parallax. What's known as positive parallax. And everything that's in front of the window is what's known as zero parallax. And I will point something out, or everything that's in front of the window is negative parallax. The biggest thing I'm going to point out here is that you notice that when somebody is staring at something that's floating out in front of the window, they're crossing their eyes. And when you're crossing your eyes to focus in on that, after a while, it can get a little painful to the people who are staring at it. I don't want to step away from the kitschiness of having things floating out in front of the window. It's one of the cool aspects of 3D. It's what makes 3D fun. But if you haven't framed your photo to have something sticking out of it, you know, most of the time everything's going to be behind that window, and that's completely fine. So here's the rule. And if this doesn't make sense to anyone, please raise your hand. Please say something, because the rest of the conversation just sort of falls apart if you don't understand this basic concept. And that is that anything can stick through the window as long as it's contained within the window. You can't have things sticking through the window that are on the edges of the frame. If you have something sticking through the window and it's touching the edges of your photo, and particularly on the sides, which we'll discuss in a little bit, if anything is sticking through your photo and it's on the sides or it's on the bottom and it's sticking through the frame, you've just created a window violation. And the best way I can describe it is if you're, I don't know, if you're staring at your hand with one eye, if you hold out your hand in front of your eye, and you stare at your hand, but then say, look past your hand and look at the wall, or look at something in the distance, your hand sort of becomes semi-transparent. And the reason for this is because your brain is trying to sort out what it's looking at and what it's focusing on. And the same is true of a window violation. If you have something sticking out of the picture and it's touching the edges of the frame, the same thing is happening to the visual center in your brain. Your brain is trying to sort out what it should be looking at. And when it can't decide what it's looking at, you get sort of this ghosting effect. And if you look at this too much and too long, or you have things sticking too far out of the window, when you stare at these photos, they hurt. They just hurt to look at. And it hurts more on a personal level if you're a good 3D photographer and understand the concept, because you're looking at it going, wow, it would have been so easy for this person to fix this photo and make this look right. Is there anybody here in the room right now that's not grasping this basic concept of it can't stick through the window if it's touching the edges of the frame? Anybody? I'll open up the chat here for a second. Is there anybody that's not wrapping their brain around that concept? I don't see anybody commenting, so I'm assuming that everybody's understanding what I'm saying. Cool. All right.
Maybe we should call on people.
But I just wanted to, so usually when you're looking
people
at
going to need anaglyph glasses, or?
Yes, I want everybody to have anaglyph glasses available. So if you don't have anaglyph glasses sitting in front of you, everybody should grab some anaglyph glasses.
Yeah, we'll give people a little time to get their anaglyph glasses.
And a weird little aside I've noticed over the years, these little paper glasses tend to work better than the nice ones you go out and pay for online. I don't know why, they just look better to me.
Yeah, it's because a piece of film is made to a specification. When you mix up a big vat of plastic and put coloring resin in it, it's much more difficult to control that.
Thank you for letting us know that, Steve. I've always kind of wondered why that is. So I always prefer the cheap ones, even though they're not comfortable to wear. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to assume everybody's got their 3D glasses. And I'm going to show everybody an example here. I'm in Stereo Photo Maker. And I'm also going to show everybody that the tips and the way that I do this is the same thing in Steroid Pro. So if you're strictly taking photos on your phone and you're working in Steroid Pro, these same concepts are going to work. And there's really only a couple of concepts that I use. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a left and a right photo. This is a photo that I took several years ago, and I'm looking down at a fire hydrant. This photo was specifically composed to have that negative parallax to pop out of the screen, but it's not in that state right now. The first, and I've got my feet in the photo and everything, and I've got this photo open. The first thing I'm going to do, and this is Stereo Photo Maker, is I'm going to hit Alt A. And what Alt A is going to do is it's going to sort of auto align this photo for everybody. As you can see, these are the adjustments that it made. I'm going to go ahead and switch this over to an anaglyph view. Put on my anaglyph glasses. And you can see that the program has already done a pretty darn good job of aligning this photo, and it has adjusted for the stereo window. But one of the things I'm going to do here is I don't want my feet in the photo. So I'm going to crop it. I'm just going to do a custom 1-to-1 crop. It'll make it a square. And as you can see, that thing is sticking out of the photo. I want everybody to sort of pay attention to the, take off your glasses for a second. And I want you to look at the rocks. And you're going to see this slight red fringing around the edges of the rocks. That means that it's sitting somewhere outside of zero parallax. It's either sitting behind it, or it's sitting behind the window, or it's sitting in front of the window. If we put on our glasses, we're going to see that those rocks are sitting behind the window. And now I'm going to use my right and left arrow keys, and this is what's going to adjust your window. So I'm going to pull out by pushing my keys to the right, and as you can see, now that window is sort of right there where the top of the fire hydrant is. And if you take off your glasses, you'll see that the top of the fire hydrant, where those little chips and the paint are and everything, they're almost perfectly lined up with each other. And when they're perfect, you can just do this visual check in anaglyph and sort of set your window just by looking at features in the photo and lining them up. So in this particular case, if I've just lined up those chips there, I know that the top of that thing is sitting, the top of that fire hydrant is sitting at zero parallax. If I put on my glasses, boy, everything is pushed way deep back into the window into positive parallax land. If I push my left arrows keys, I'm now slowly, I'm starting to push this thing out of the screen. And I can keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And I hit this point where it's like, boy, that window is right down at the rocks. And again, if you're to take off your glasses, you're going to see that that fringing now is pretty much just gone from the rocks. You can't even really see it. But you put on your glasses and you can see dimension to those rocks. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to over adjust it, and I'm just going to keep moving to the left. And now what I've done here, if you look around the edges of the photo, and particularly on the right side and the left side of the photo, it's now kind of painful to look at. And that's the thing about window violations. You can make them and you can cause them to happen, but they don't really need to be there. I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is that they just want to have everything in 3D sort of laying in people's laps. And it doesn't need to be there all in the quest to have that something popping out of the screen. So if I was presenting this particular photo to someone and I want to go as kitschy as possible and have as much pop out of the photo as possible, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to frame that window just about right there. And that's the way I'm going to save it. It looks good. It's really super 3D and it's sticking out of the screen. So the rule is, the rule is this, and I'm going to, it's okay to have things sticking through the screen. It's okay, and it looks good. That's sticking right out. And it's okay to do that just as long as you're not touching the edges of the photo with things that are sticking through the frame. And are there any questions from anyone? Pop it into the chat if you have any questions, because I'm...
Am I on? I turned the audio on. One thing you can do is put your finger out in front of the screen, not touch the image, but move your finger back and forth, and your brain can tell you how far out of the screen it is.
Yeah, that's kind of a cool little thing, for sure. Let me show you, everybody, my second technique.
I just wanted to add a comment for people who maybe aren't quite grasping the idea of the window violation. When you have a window violation, the nature of the conflict is it looks like it should be in front of the window frame, but it's cut off by the window frame because you don't have any image outside of the window. So that's what creates the visual conflict.
All right. Yeah. That's another great way of putting it. I'm gonna go ahead and share. I'm gonna go ahead and share this photo. And this is actually the photo that got me back in trouble back in 2009. If you're to look at this one as a straight anaglyph, you've got this massive window violation across the bottom of the photo. And you've also got a window violation on the left and the right side of the screen. And this is after auto adjusting the photo. And, you know, as a newbie 3D photographer, I thought this was so cool. You know, here's my son, he's sticking out of the window. Boy, this sand looks like it's dropping in my lap. You know, I really thought that this looked really cool. But the more and more you stare at a photo like this, the more painful it gets to look at it. So again, what I did with this photo, what I ended up doing was I just sort of decided how far out I wanted that photo to stick, and then I cropped around it. Let me see here. I kind of went, okay, well, this is about right here is where everything is. And so I kind of went like this, and even then I've still got a little bit of a window violation here at the bottom. And so I can kind of just adjust it and put everything back. And you're still getting a great 3D effect here. You're getting this, you know, you're still getting the sand coming at you. You're still getting a lot of depth with the kid, and you're, you know, and his arms sticking there a little bit, and the person behind him, and the trees in the background. I mean, there's still a lot of depth going on here, and it's still a really good photo. But I'm going to show you guys a little trick that, and it's probably the one I use the most, but I'm gonna share a different photo with you. The photo that I'm going to use is this one right here. This is a finger synced photo that I think I took back in 2008, I think.
Get it with the fountain.
Yep. Okay, so this was another photo that I had taken, and this one gets a little more technically weird, but I wanted to do this because the objects in the foreground are definable. I mean, they're like right there in your face. And the object that's closest is this little planter lamp right here. And what I'm going to do is, this is my favorite way to adjust for the stereo window. And that is when you're in Stereo Photo Maker, that is hit F4. And this puts you into an interlaced mode. You don't have to have an interlaced monitor. I mean, I do have an interlaced monitor, so I can put this on my left side monitor and see it in 3D. But even if you don't have an interlaced monitor, it's no big deal. The reason that I'll use it is because I'll spot whatever's the closest object, and I'll just use those same keys, and I'll start sliding it over and lining it up. And this works just sort of that same way that anaglyph window works. As you can see along the edge here, this is going to be my object that's closest. if I line that up and it just sort of lands perfect, I can tell you that at this point, everything is behind the window. Let me crop this really quick. Now, and I'll go ahead and put it in anaglyph. Now, if you look at this, you're going to see that everything is behind the window. There are some other issues that are going on with this particular photo that have to do with parallax. But again, I think that the point of today's lesson would be more just understanding, you know, how to set your window. So what I'm going to do here, though, on this particular photo, and I'm going to show you how, for whatever reason, when you do window violations on the right side and the left side of your photo, it tends to be a little bit more painful than when the violations are at the bottom of the photo. So in this case, all I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust my window back to where that fountain is. And I'm looking at the right side of my screen, and I'm going to sort of stop at the edge of the fountain. And now that lantern is sort of sticking out, and it's now in negative parallax land. The reason that it's not bugging your eyes so much is because it's in the middle of the frame and it's not touching the edges of the frame. So a lot of times you can sort of get away with having something sticking out in front of the window if it's touching the bottom edge. But I will tell you that if it comprises the entire bottom edge, then it's going to look really messy. So this is sort of that, it's kind of that gray area where you can have it sort of sticking out just a little. There are some parallax issues, like I said, with this photo, and by actually making this particular adjustment to this particular photo, it makes it much easier to look at than had I shoved everything back behind the window.
Can I make a compositional comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
I teach photography and graphic design, and in my opinion, this is just my opinion, but having something so prominently in the foreground, even if it weren't in the negative space,
right,
to me, it's just all I want to look at.
Right.
I disregard the rest of the photo. It
Yeah.
seems kind of a newbie type compositional thing.
I took this photo. I had been shooting 3D for 2 years.
Okay.
This photo was
I've taken this similar.
Right. Yes. So here, let me share another photo with you here, and that sort of illustrates the same point. Let me look for this really quick. What can I say? I was getting a little nostalgic. This photo right here. Let me back up a little bit. In this particular photo, the string is coming out in negative parallax, but you're still, it's so small that your attention is more on the kite. But you know, I went ahead and on this particular photo, and I made that concession so that I could have the kite sticking out. As you can see, the kite sticking out of the window. If you were to take off your glasses, you're going to see that flat plane is kind of like right up in here. This is sort of where I'm hitting that zero parallax, and then everything else is sort of jumping out of the picture. And I knew, as you can see right here, here's the string here and the string here. I knew that I was going to get a window violation out of this. But again, it's so small, it's so tiny, you can get away with it.
I think the colors in this in anaglyph form just drive your eyes crazy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Let me pop it over to Dubois.
There we go.
Say that, it's killing me.
Yeah. But there
Much
you go.
better.
This is one of those photos where you know you're violating that window rule, but you're doing it at the bottom, and it's not something that's huge or distracting. I'm going to bring up this photo here because this is one of these. I took this photo, I think, last year in Chicago's O'Hare Airport. I just thought it looked really cool. It almost looks like it's generated in a computer program.
It looks a lot cleaner than it really is there.
And I've never seen it empty. It must have been during pandemic.
You know, I was stuck on a red eye, and it was at like 3 o'clock in the morning. It was at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when there was some storms going on. So I had landed in Chicago really late, but I was walking up this hallway and I was like, wow, that would just make for a great 3D photo. And I shot this on my cell phone. But this is one of those photos that, once again, it would be very tempting to have a huge window violation at the bottom of the screen. And if you're a newbie and you're really not paying attention, you know, you may frame this photo like this, where it's sticking out at the bottom, you know, and it's just sort of dumping into the viewer's lap. And it does make for a little bit uncomfortable viewing, especially if you're in interlaced mode. Some anaglyph can be a little bit more forgiving. But if we were looking at this on a movie screen or an interlaced on a 3D TV, it's going to look really bad. So again, I'm going to use that. I can either use that interlaced mode to line up at the bottom edge. And I know that as soon as they're perfectly lined up down there, I know that I'm now sitting flat at 0 parallax. And if I switch this over to anaglyph, you're going to see that everything comes right up to the edge of the window at the bottom. You almost feel like you can walk into the picture. And that makes for great 3D. I'm going to point out the same thing here with Steroid Pro on your phone. So I just shot this the other night in Steroid. And what I did is once I had this and I hit my auto adjust button, and now that I'm in auto adjust, it puts you into this interlaced mode. And I had already decided that I wanted to crop my photo right here where this wood shelf is. And so all I'm doing is I'm lining up the wood grain. And once I've got that wood grain lined up, I know that the edge of that shelf is sitting right there at 0 parallax. And when I'm done, I've got this sort of this perfectly composed 3D photo. So the concept works in Steroid Pro. It works in Stereo Photo Maker. Again, you know, Stereo Photo Maker, you can use the anaglyph to line things up, visually line things up, or in both programs, you can use the interlaced mode to line things up.
Yeah, for those who don't know, I3D Steroid Pro is kind of a version of 3D Stereo Photo Maker, but for the iPhone. He also has one for the Android. The Android one's actually even a little better.
This is the Android version.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So and it's a neat little program. It's a little more, you know, you really have to sort of play around with it to learn how it works. But again, this is the program that I think most people are using when they're posting to Instagram, as I think most people are using this particular program. There's one other thing you can do, and we'll talk about it really quick here, and that is adding frames. Let me separate this out. You can put frames on your photos, and a lot of times when you're working with a frame, it even helps you define the edges of your photo even better. And you don't even necessarily have to use a frame, but you can use that frame temporarily for helping you spot your edges of your photo. So let me go back and open up our good old trusty I think I might have these things backwards. Let's go ahead and open this guy back up. go ahead and crop it. Now, I don't know how many people are into free viewing. I can do both. I can free view parallel and cross eye. And for a long time, I would, for most of the time, I would just do everything in cross eye. And it's, for me, it's just easier than whipping and grabbing glasses all the time. A lot of times I'll just pop it up on my screen, but you can set borders on your photo. And I just hit Control B. There is a way to set up your border sizes right here in your border options. It's just, you just have to play with it. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch this over to cross view. And I'm looking at it in cross view right now, and I can see where my edges are, and I can see that my rocks are behind there, and I can even use my right and left arrow keys to adjust it just visually, just to get it right up to the edges. And I'm happy with it. I can turn around and switch them, and I can remove my borders, and it's good to go. So
what was the reason for the borders, if I may?
Sometimes when you have a border on your photos, it'll help you define your edges a little better. It'll help you see them a little bit better. It's like literally like putting a frame on a photo. You can, you've got that frame on your photo, and now you can really see visually where your edges are, and you can define what's going behind it and what's sticking out in front of it, and know that you're not breaking these edges of your photo.
A museum would do this on a wall to isolate the photo from the background, which is saying exactly what you just said, Carl. So you can see the edges and you're not distracted by surrounding things.
Exactly.
Carl, can you please show this image in color anaglyph? So for those of us who have those glasses handy, with the border. I mean, with the frame, I guess, the frame you put on.
And you can see by just having that contrasting border, how much easier it is to really, really see your edges. Sometimes when you just have two photos sitting next to each other and there's no border, or there's no septum between them, it's hard to, sometimes it's just harder to see.
Carl, one of the things we did at work for the films we created, and Phil McNally authored this for DreamWorks, which was having a floating window where the left edge could be different than the right edge. So if we had a left side violation, we would pull that left side border up and leave the other opposite side alone. Is there, I haven't tried that with Stereo Photomaker, but, or does anyone know if that's a possibility to create that? I think I may have done it manually for myself for a few images, but I wasn't quite sure if other people are using some type of design feature to get the left side edge pushed forward and the right side edge pushed back, or vice versa.
Yeah, there are ways of creating floating frames within Stereo Photomaker. I personally have never used them, but I know what they are. I understand, like if I'm watching a movie where you can tell that they were having parallax problems, and you can see like the sort of the implementing the floating frame, and everything sort of pops out of your screen for just a moment, then pops back. It's because they were having issues adjusting it to fit on the screen. And you can actually see floating windows being used in movies quite a bit. I do see that. There's another way for adjusting, and there's a wonderful program called, it's a German, the author is German, and it's called Stereomasken. And there's a fella on Flickr who is he goes by the name Stereotron, and he is like the master of using stereo masking. So, and that's really helpful when you've got something that's sticking really far out of the window, and you can you can create a border that comes out and wraps around what's sticking out of the frame. Let me see if I can find him really quick. You know, so there are ways of doing it. I was trying to this morning, more than anything, was just to sort of cover the basics of like what the stereo window is and why it's important to be aware of it and to adjust for it. I think as soon as you start getting into floating frames, start getting into stereo masks, you know, you're sort of heading into like more advanced territory. I think in the past, I think I've only ever used a stereo mask one time, and it was just sort of for the fun of it. Let me see here if I can share my screen. Let me bring over my.
The floating frames score.
And you can see, like when I post here on Flickr, I generally only post in cross view, and I'll occasionally do an anaglyph, but I put borders on all of my photos. I have that septum and that border so that when people are looking at it, that they're getting just like a really clean view with really clean edges. It's just sort of I don't know, it's just sort of a thing of mine. I have to go, boy, I was going to show you guys an example here, but it's probably posted in cross view. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
Could I just butt in for a second? Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. For me, another interesting thing about the border is that it tells you immediately where your screen level is, where your sort of zero parallax level. So in that example of your fire hydrant, you could immediately see, okay, well, that rock is behind the window. This one's slightly protruding. So apart from just defining the edges, the two-dimensional edges, it also separates your back and your forward.
Right. It does. It's you know, like here you go. Here's a photo that I intentionally framed to have it sticking out of the window. And I'm sorry, this is just for folks who can cross view, but you can see like the edge of my hand almost looks like it's reaching down through the edge of the frame, and you know, but boy, my arm is sort of touching it, but it's not breaking it. It's not breaking through the frame. It's reaching down through the frame. But I think I only did one with it actually had a stereo mask, and I had to find it real quick. It's this one right here. Again, I'm sorry guys, it's a cross view, but I think I did this in the stereo masking program. But what I did is I just had a picture of a cane sitting against a wall, and I went ahead and I brought the mask out so it's wrapping around. Around the cane sticking through the window. But there is a fellow.
Carl, that's so interesting. I've only seen examples of an object coming out and crossing over the black, you know, in a proper way. I've never seen an example of the mask curving around the object. So thank you for showing that as a sample.
You're welcome. I'm just like trying to pull this stuff off the top of my head. If you get onto Flickr and you look up this fellow right here, Sasha Becker, goes by the name Stereotron. Absolute masterclass in using the stereo masking method. And this is where he has, you know, things are sticking out of the photo, and he wraps that frame around the photo and allows it to be brought out, and it completely eliminates those edge violations that drive the viewer crazy. So he is someone definitely to check out. If you guys want a real master class in just frames in general, Gordon's logo for the 2021 3D Con. This photo here is an absolute masterclass in using stereo framing, or in using the stereo window and understanding it and using it to your advantage. Let me pull it up in Let me pull that up in Stereo Photo Maker real quick. So when you look at this photo here, you can see that, like, if you're looking at his body, you can see that his body is pushed back behind the window, and it's okay to come. It's okay to come out of the window. And in here, he's had to crop around his hands, and he's had to crop around himself. But you look at some of these other ones, like, I don't know who this gentleman is here, but here you go. You know, if something's going to stick out of the window, he's doing
That's
it. But
me,
it's,
Carl.
oh, is that you, Steve?
Yeah,
Hey, Steve, how you doing, man?
good.
But yeah, this photo here is fantastic. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic because he's not only does he understand the stereo, it's clear that he understands the stereo window, but he's using it in a very creative way. So that's about it. I figured this class this morning would run about 45, 50 minutes, and that's kind of where we're sitting. Does anybody have any questions or comments? I would just encourage, you know, anybody that, you know, I have found that in the past, if you reach out to someone and try to explain a window violation to them, a lot of times you'll get like oh yeah, I know what that is. And but the more you talk to them, you sort of come to realize that they don't. And I don't really find Instagram to be sort of a very conversational sort of platform. So my general response on Instagram is if I'm going past your photo and it's got a really nasty window violation, I don't click like on the photo. If it was in a forum setting, and I've done it a million times in the past, if it's in a forum setting, I'm more than happy to reach out to someone and go, hey, you know, let me tell you what's wrong with this and how you can fix it. In the Instagram age, though, that's not really there. People are given to 1 and 2 word comments and, hey, wow, that looks great, or beautiful, or nice, or sweet, you know, and it doesn't, the conversation doesn't really go beyond that. And I see so many fantastic photographers out there with a lot of potential that are presenting their photos in a way that are just, you know, they're just painful to look at. So I'm going to open up the floor here. Anybody wants to share anything, say anything?
I want to ask how you cut out that picture of the cane against the wall. How you custom cut out the frame.
It's a freeware program, and it's called Stereomasken, STEREOMASKEN. There's an English version of it and a German version of it. And there
the link is in the chat.
And there is a wonderful, let me see if I can pull it up on the old YouTube here. From what I recall, okay, so it looks like Rathanagiri did it, but that's not the one. These ones here that are posted by, she's changed her name, the Cross-Eyed Beauties, but she has 3 lessons: depth in frames, curves in frames, and she's got another one. But these are really in-depth looks at how to use the Stereomasken program. And you're like looking at your screen and you're literally visually moving your mask around and switching it up and stretching things back behind and into the positive parallax, and stretching things out into negative parallax, and wrapping your frames around the photo. I tend to be a very traditional photographer, so I don't. I'm kind of, you know, I'm a very angular sort of photographer. I'm always sort of framing my world in boxes and rectangles. But you know, some people have the talent for it. And I tell you what, if you're the kind of person who loves to shoot hyper stereo photos, boy, Stereomasken will save your life. It'll save your photos. I try not to get too hyper in my photos. But somebody like Sasha Becker that I was pointing out on Flickr, his photos are very, very hyper stereo. And he saves them by using this stereo masking, and you almost feel like you're looking into a little miniature diorama of these beautiful cityscapes and landscapes. And sometimes I just like to leave the masters to the masters. So, but at any rate, those are some great things to check out. And again, the stereo masking is a freeware program to anyone. And if you've got, I guess if you've got a few nights, sit around, mess around with it, then go for it. I mean, give it a swing. It's certainly, man, I've seen some stuff done in stereo masking just blow your mind. So anything else? Anybody want to add anything?
Can I add something? Bob here.
Sure.
Yeah, so someone was asking about the technique of cropping the left or right edge of just one side of the pair to fix the violations. And Gordon Au has done some tutorials on this technique of modifying the images he presents as anaglyph, as you say. So you might want to check his website. I don't remember the site offhand, but he has some very nice tutorials.
And his name is Gordon Au, Gordon. Last name Au is AU.
Yes. Well, someone had a picture up a little bit ago with him out of the window from the 3D con. That's Gordon. Yeah,
very
talented trumpeter.
Yes. Yeah, we just snagged him for the LA3D Club. So he's joining our competitions now and giving us, some of us old timers, a run for our money. So if there's nobody else that wants to add anything to
yes, I do. I'd love to. Oh, I see Andrew has a comment.
Oh, you can go ahead. I just thought maybe another seminar to have would be about how to select stuff to allow it to go off the frame.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe we can get Terry.
There's a whole art in that.
Yeah, Terry used to do that. I can't think of her last name.
You got to cut it out. You cut out the detail. Yeah. And that there's a whole art to that in Photoshop. So.
Yeah, I think we can definitely have some more advanced classes here in the near future.
It would be really nice. I'm listening to this in the UK, and this is 6 o'clock at night, so this is really convenient. And thank you for making this an open session. I really appreciate that.
Don't forget we have our. Oh, I'm sorry. We have our meetings third Thursday of the month. Those are free as well. So same location.
Thank you.
That's 7 p.m. Go ahead. Who was talking?
It was me. I just wanted to add one observation, something that I've often explained to people who were new to 3D. For instance, at The Simpsons, we were doing a 3D theatrical short, and the director had never done anything 3D before. He wanted to know on the first day, how can he possibly plan shots and explain how he wants the 3D to work if he doesn't understand any of the terminology, or in this case, he had no knowledge of what the stereo window was. And my explanation to him was, rather than thinking of it as a frame, think of it as a proscenium stage. On a stage, you have the wings, and actors can go behind the wings, but they can't go in front of the wings on the stage. So things can be as far back on the stage or right up to the foot of the stage, but they can never go in front of the wings of the stage. And then that stage has a runway that extends right off the front and right down to the eyes of the one person sitting in the audience. You never have to have anything ever go down that runway, but it's there if you want to use it.
Fantastic. Great way to describe it.
the director right off said, wait a minute. So if I just think of this as like a stage play, I can describe anything in a 3D image. I said, yeah. And he said, this is going to go great. And that's how we worked out framing.
Perfect. We could have done this meeting in 3 minutes just with that. So that's awesome. Great way to describe it.
And Carl, I think that gets into my comment. I wanted to just really celebrate how you delivered this material. I love the image you showed at the beginning that showed, you know, the distance for behind the screen, at the screen, and before the screen. And I also thought your sample of the child in the sand and how you created that image and you were so happy about it, but you got constructive criticism from another person on how you could do it better, and that you were open to that. And then using that sample, and then the point I want to make is going in and recropping it to eliminate some of the image area made your image really stronger. And that kind of leans into the idea of being a stereo photographer, but then critiquing your work, not necessarily taking the whole image, but what is going to be the best part of the image that's going to make for the best stereo photograph. Because so often as stereo photographers, as we all embrace in this meeting, we want to use everything. But you showed how cropping part of that out made for a better photo. So I just wanted to accent on that, and thank you for bringing that example to this presentation.
Thank you. It's I appreciate it. I like try to rack my brain, you know, from years and years of photography and go, geez, what would be a good example? But in particular, the fire hydrant photo I've always thought is this great photo for, you know, a good anaglyph example, where you can just, you know, by adjusting and watching it slide back in and out of the photo you know, sliding in and out of the stereo window is sort of a nice example. And I cropped my toes out of the photo because they just don't belong. But yeah, it definitely photo cropping. Photo cropping is almost a separate topic. But boy, I tell you what, you know, sort of exploring your photo and just finding that perfect area of the photo to tell your story is a bit of a it's a bit of a, I don't know, kind of its own little artistic adventure, and trying to decide what's going to look best. So yeah, I appreciate it. You know, you just sit around and just rack your brain trying to say, geez, what's the best way I can describe this, you know?
If you guys could all unmute yourselves and give Carl a hand.
Yeah.
A minute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All of my guys in the UK, I'm a bit of an Anglophile, so my condolences on the loss of your Prince Philip.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, taken much too young.
Yeah.
Very useful presentation, Carl. Thank you.
You are very welcome. You guys have a great day. Fantastic seeing everybody.
Yep.
Yeah. Another thing, the person I was thinking about who often goes outside the window and clips around it is Terry Wilson. So I'll try to contact her to see if she'll maybe put a part of a workshop on.
That would be great. She's a fantastic stereographer.
Yeah, and good to put some faces to names that I know, and it's good to see you. And thank you for the invite.
Thanks.
Welcome. Have a great day.
Oh, and one more thing on YouTube, we'll have these either at our club site, or I've started a special site just for stereo photo maker tutorials. So just on YouTube, look under Stereo Photo Maker, and hopefully you'll find it and you can subscribe. Thank you.
Steve, I really like the Zoom stuff that the club has been doing. And when things get back to normal, I would like if we could still continue some of the Zoom stuff, even with the meetings.
Yeah, we're planning to do that. The only issue is that the internet is very poor where we have our meetings.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll just tape it and then show it that way.
Yeah. Okay.
But we're going to discuss that in the next board meeting.
Yeah.
I think he's just talking about just still continuing to do like separate Zoom sessions.
Oh, that's a good idea. I like doing the board meetings this way. It saves a lot of driving.
Yeah. Oh, hey,
Okay.
Diego. Good to see you, Diego. I finally get to put a face with the name. All right.
Right on.
Take care, guys.
Bye. Meeting will end in 5 seconds.
Thank you.